Okay, folks, so we're going to take a look at the first section in chapter 4. So this is lesson 4.1, graphing equations in slope-intercept form. So this is the handout you should have. Make sure you have this before you start watching this video so you can fill in the notes with me. Hope everyone had a nice Thanksgiving and you're back ready to go. So we're going to graph this equation and we're going to graph it using intercepts. So this is a review, something we did when I was in school. So we're going to use the intercepts by letting x equal 0 and letting y equal 0. So we call this the cover-up method, and if we let x equal 0, we're covering up the x term, so we have negative 3y equals negative 6. And if negative 3y equals negative 6, then y is equal to positive 2. So we have the y-intercept. We can graph that point. So now we only need one other point to form a line. So we can let y equal 0. So once again, we cover up the y term and its sign. And so we have the equation 2x equals negative 6. And if 2x equals negative 6, then we have x is equal to negative 3. So negative 3, 0 is the x-intercept. So negative 3, 0. And then we can connect those with hopefully a ruler, make it a little bit straighter than mine. And we have our graph. So that's just one way to graph a line using the x and y intercepts. It's a nice way to do it if the equation is in standard form. And especially since 2 and 3 are both factors of 6, so we get intercepts that are integers. So they're easy to graph. But what I'd like to do today is show you another method, which I believe some of you are already familiar with, called the slope-intercept form. I'd like us to take this equation, I'm going to leave the graph up there, and I'm following along with your notes. It says, now let's take the equation in standard form and solve it for y. So I'm just going to erase the work here of finding the intercept so it's not so cluttered. So let's take this equation here and let's solve it for y. So the first thing we would do, right, we're going to think of y as the only variable. Make it a different color, right? We want to get y alone. So to get y alone, what's the first step? Very good. We're going to subtract 2x from both sides. So these two terms cannot be combined because they're not like terms. So I'm just going to rewrite it as negative 2x minus 6. Yes, I could put the negative 6 first, but I choose to put the x term first because that's usually how we see it. And now we're going to get the y alone. So we need to get rid of this negative 3. It's being multiplied. So we need to divide both sides by negative 3. Now I could do the whole thing by negative 3. But I know kind of what I'm going for, so I'm going to do each term by negative 3. Okay, because that's what it really means if you're dividing the whole side by negative 3. So now I have y by itself. And y is equal to negative 2 over negative 3, which is positive 2/3 x, minus 6 divided by negative 3. A negative divided by negative is a positive. So now I'd like us to take this equation and compare it to the graph of our line. Because this is the same line, right? The same equation, it just looks different. So let's notice some similarities between our graph of our line and our equation. We look at the slope-intercept form, and we can clearly identify what the slope and the y-intercept in the equation is in this form. So let's look at our graph, right? What is the slope? If I want to find the slope, I could either use the slope formula or I can count rise over run. I think I'm going to do that, right? I've got a rise of 2 and I have a run of 3. So the slope is up 2, right 3. So up and right would both be positive. So the slope is 2/3. They can fill that in. What is the y-intercept of this line? So the graph of the line passes through the y-axis at 2, right? That was the y-intercept. In algebra, we call that b, which I know is kind of weird, right? But we do call that b. So we've got the slope is 2/3, and we have the y-intercept of 2. So if we look at our equation, right, that's not to be a master of the obvious here, but I'm going to be. The slope is the coefficient of the x, and the y-intercept is the constant. And this is only true if y is by itself, right? So you've taken this standard form, and we've transformed that into what we call slope-intercept form. Some people call this y equals mx plus b form, which is kind of just a short way of saying it, but it's better to call it slope-intercept form because that way you're really identifying what m and b are. So this process I don't need to go through every time, right? I can graph it with either method, right? If it's given to me in this form, I tend to not use the intercept method. If it's given to me in standard form, I tend to use the intercept method if it's convenient. So 2 and 3, as I said, were factors of -6. And so that was very convenient to find the intercepts and graph it that way. I only went through this process to show you folks that the graph with this equation and these intercepts would have a slope of 2/3 and a y-intercept of 2, which would be clear in the equation. Okay. So this can be a very quick way of graphing if you're given an equation in this form. Okay, so you see you have this information here. You might want to highlight that. This is slope-intercept form, y equals mx plus b, where m is the slope and b is the y-intercept. Okay. So we have some examples that are there for you to refer to. And I'd like to do a couple out for you. Okay. Oh, and can I have a paper towel, please? The eraser is not working fantastically. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, so let's see what kind of problems they will expect of us, knowing that important information that we just kind of figured out, okay? Well, if they want an equation, so an example 1, if we take a look at that, in example 1, they're saying, give me an equation if you know that the line has a slope of -4 and it has a y-intercept of 3. Okay, so basically this is just a super easy type where you're just saying, well, if it has a slope of 4, then of negative 4, that's M. If it has a y-intercept of 3, that's B. Okay. So this is what they're expecting you to do. They're expecting you to say, okay, then the equation is y equals negative 4x plus 3. Okay, so those are super quick. Right? Just plugging in the slope and the y-intercept. Okay, now if we are looking to graph a line or find an equation, then they may or may not tell us how they want us to do that. Okay. In example 2, what they're trying to do is they're trying to say, well, here's your equation and I want you to graph it. Now it doesn't say specifically how, but they're showing you that they're going to graph it, not S8. Oops, sorry about that. So what they did here is they're showing you that you can graph this by changing the equation to a y equals mx plus b equation. So what they've done is they solved it for y by subtracting the 3x and dividing by negative 4. So they're getting y equals 3/4 x minus 2. And then they're giving you instructions as to how you would graph this, right? So once you have it in this form, as long as you understand what each value would represent, it's very quick to graph. So graphing this, I would start at the y-intercept of negative 2. So I'm starting at 0, 0, negative 2. And then from this point, right, from this point, it's very important. From that point, we have to count a slope of 3/4. So from negative 2, we're going to count up 3, 1, 2, 3, hold our pencil there, and then we're going to go right 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Put another point, okay? And so some people like to do it a couple times, right? But it really only takes one time, and as long as you do it correctly, right? I went up 3, and I went right 4. Okay? So if it was already in this form, that would be the quick way to do it. They're showing you that if you have it in standard form, you can transform it, as we've been doing for quite a while now, and then identify the y-intercept and the slope and count that slope. Okay. All right. Let me have you go to the back side, please, and do for me right now 1, 2, 3, 4, and 8. So right now, please do 1, 2, 3, 4, and 8. Okay, and put me on pause right now, and then come back and check your work in a minute. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 8. Go do it, folks. All right, so let's see how you folks did on these few problems. You've got some information in numbers 1, 2, and 3. It says write an equation of a line in slope-intercept form with a given slope and y-intercept. So when you see slope-intercept form, probably want to get in the habit of writing down y equals mx plus b. And this is the form they want it in. So they want you to leave the x and y in there, and they want you to replace it with an m and a b. And they're actually just handing it to you on a silver platter here, as they say. They're giving you everything you need just to rewrite the equation. So the slope is 8, so that's the m. The y-intercept is negative 3, so that's b. So we just plug it in. Y equals 8x minus 3. And that's it. These are super fast, right? Slope is negative 2, y-intercept is negative 1. Y equals negative 2x minus 1. Slope is negative 1, y-intercept is negative 7. Y equals, we could write negative 1 or just negative x. either one, minus 7. So negative 1 and negative 1x would be the same thing. Alright, so the whole point of being able to be familiar with this form is so you can go between graph and equation, equation and graph. So they have here number 4, a graph for you, and they've labeled the points just to make it super clear. Because you really don't know how a graph is scaled unless it's labeled. We usually assume that it's by ones unless it says otherwise. But so we've got some points. And it says write the equation in slope-intercept form. So once again, when I see slope-intercept form, I'm going to write that down. And when I'm given a graph, I can just find slope from the graph, or I can use the slope formula. I don't really see a need to do that when I'm given the points so clearly and they end up right, on an actual integer marking. So I've got a slope of rise of 2, run of 1. So the slope is 2. So that means it's 2x, right? And the y-intercept, well, I look on the y-axis and it's negative 2. So b is negative 2. So that means that it's 2x minus 2. And that's the equation of our line. Okay. Now, if they gave you this equation, would you be able to make a graph? How did you do on number 8? Let's take a look at that one. I need the paper towel does a better job. Okay. So they want you to make a graph of, in number 8, I said, right? Wanted you folks to do number 8. Probably I picked that one because I had a negative in it. So sometimes that's going to be a little tricky for students. So you have an equation, and they basically are saying graph an equation of a line that has a y-intercept of 2, and it has a slope of negative 3. And when I graph a slope, I need a rise and a run. So if it's not a fraction, I can make it a fraction very, very easily by putting it over the number 1. I almost heard you say that. Okay, so we've got a y-intercept of 2, and we've got a slope of negative 3 over 1. So I'm going to go from this point, from the 2, down 3, hold my pencil there, don't put a point there, over 1. Okay, so that's the graph of the line y equals negative 3x plus 2. All right, so what I really would love for you to do right now is to finish up the few problems, the 1, 2, 3, 4 problems on this page, and then I think there's another worksheet with it that you're gonna graph and go over, all right? Please do the homework that I've posted on Schoology, and be sure to check it tomorrow. I'll have my answer key there, but you really need to come in with your homework done, work shown, out please, okay, because that's the only way you're gonna learn. So I hope you folks are all doing well. I really miss being in school with you guys, and I'm gonna try to get back as soon as I can. Take care, guys.